Hello, everyone. My name is Chuanxin Minos New. I come from the Department of Rehabilitation Medicine, Region Hospital, Shanghai Jiao Tong University. Today gives me great pleasure to talk about how to face the challenges in the clinical use of rehabilitation robots. And in specific, I will be touching base upon how to do prediction and rollback for latency and 5G force control of rehabilitation robots. Uh, So above all, we'd like to promote the use of what we believe a very useful tool in the clinical rehabilitation, the rehabilitation robot. Now, in my research field, I particularly care about the upper limb movements. Now, when look for the evidence, we search through different sources of information. Now, it includes the technology reports, the clinical guidelines, and then the meta-analyses and the first-hand randomized control trials. And from all different kinds of sources, we found different findings. And here we list several of them representative points. Now, for instance, in technology, very often than not, we found that we would like large resistive force applied onto patients. And very easily you will find the existing robots not providing enough force output or torque output. So that's telling us that when designing a new generation of robots, we want them to be stronger. And similar things also happened. I would not go through every single one of them, but for instance, from the guideline, we realized that the recommendation level of rehabilitation robots in a lot of existing guidelines is not at the highest level yet, which means that from the existing clinical trials, it's not inconclusive to say that the benefits way outweighs the risk, which means there's still a long way to go to accumulate a high level of evidence. Now, the meta-analysis is another kind of ways to syndicate different sources of evidence. And we found that in a lot of, if you pulled the clinical studies together, usually you will find no significance between other treatment groups or the conventional therapy and the rehabilitation use. That is getting better and better. We are seeing more and more um, statistically significant evidence in the comparison, but the status quo is still not fully supporting the use of clinical rehabilitation robots. And also, the first-hand evidence of RCT is also pointing to the similar directions. Now, from these summaries, we generated some insights, can be put into three categories. Now, we realized that the quality of clinical evidence is not at its highest level, possibly because there are a lot of confounding factors, in the sense that the experiments can be better designed to control, for instance, the dosage and the disease stage, so on and so forth. And the second point is that there's usually insufficient training intensity. And that also has something to do with, for instance, the resistance we talked about in the very beginning. And third thing, we realized that the compensatory movement is another point that worth its highlight. If we do not control or restrain the compensatory movements, that usually would prevent the real problematic joints or muscles from getting enough training. So I'd like to pinpoint to all these three points and talk about how we deal with them. Now, I admitted that this is only a fraction of the points that we identified. I believe this chart of problems will accumulate as we do more and more, we gather more and more information. So the first thing I want to talk about is how do we restrain the compensatory movement? Now, if you take a look at this patient, when this is a patient with stroke, when he's making upper limb movements, reaching movements with his right affected arm, you can see that the person is leaning forward, and then the trunk movements and then the um, leaning forward part are all unwanted. And the joints that we want to train is the shoulder joint and the elbow joint. So we need to find a way to restrict that movements. So the first thing is we need to realize that to be able to capture it, okay, you are making compensatory movements. Now, the technology we use is the motion capture using the commercial level of webcams. Now, this one explains the data flow of, first of all, we want to record a video stream from the commercial level of um, webcam camera. And eventually we want to reconstruct the person's body posture and then overlap that with a video and play that to either the experimenter um, or the subject himself. And this shows in a very primitive mode how eventually what we're going to do with that. Now on the left you see original video, on the right you see a video going through a public 5G internet. There's some delay there, but it allows us to see whether the person is performing with any compensatory movement. Now, again, this is the early demo of the technology. Eventually, we're going to put this coupled with the uh, upper limb rehabilitation robot to detect the compensatory movements. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is interoperable workflow. Uh, this part of technology was proposed because we want to um, put all kinds of data together when we're assessing the clinical efficacy of rehabilitation robots. Now, in the centerpiece, you will see that we have a subject that's holding the handle of, again, a Fourier M2 rehabilitation robot. Now, when a person is making a movement, now naturally we have all sorts of physiological data that's available. So we can, for instance, from the top left corner, we can collect the brain activity using the functional near infrared spectroscopy, and from the bottom left, we can have full body motion capture, and we can also have surface electromyography that's capturing the muscle activation. And from the top right corner, we can see the robot itself can provide us with the endpoint movement. So all these multimodal data, if we put them together, they will tell us a lot about whether the robot is doing the right thing of helping the patient recovering their movement ability. However, this technology is not automatically available. We have to develop it. Now, one rationale why we have to put into a lot of effort in doing this is because the synchronization between devices matters. If we take a look at the red traces in this slide, we'll see that naturally the EMG precedes the movement trajectory. That's what you can see from the right lines. Now, but if you look at the blue curve, which is exactly the same EMG, but with the latency between devices. So the technology needs to remove that latency, identify that and remove that, which is called synchronization between devices. And as long as, so every time we add one device, we need to solve this synchronization and latency removal problem one more time. So there needs to be a unified way of doing that. Now here we're at Beijing Hospital, Jiao Tong University, and also in collaboration with Fourier, we are developing a technology. It's a piece of software called X Engine. It's a lower level of application that allows different sources of information to be synchronized and different instruments, scientific instruments, to be controlled in a unified manner. Now, the real case we're showing here, now the X engine's already able to collect the kinematic data, the EMG data, and then the functional near infrared data. And this is the data from a 23-year-old male healthy subject. And this just showcased that we are already able to do this. Now, the last point I want to talk about is the interconnectivity or the teleoperation between robots. Now, this is our collaborator and colleague managed to show us at a company. Now you can see that if a person is holding a M2 robot, and then he can navigate through the maze, and then when the handle is bumping through the virtual wall, and the person could see that. And later on, we can add another uh, uh, independent operator on the right, and these two persons can navigate through the same maze. It's actually a interconnected world, and these two balls, they can bump into each other, and then the person can feel each other. So this is a great a demonstration of the technology that allows the interconnectivity between devices. And this gives us the opportunity to do group therapy. And in hospital, we welcome technologies like this because it opens many doors. We can think about new therapeutic approaches. Now, this is what's been done at Beijing in our department. We talked about how do we connect robots that's even farther away. For instance, their geographic distance is longer than 3 kilometers. So just now, what I showed you is within the same room, but it's two different devices. But now, what I'm showing you is the device that's 3 kilometers away. So the centerpiece is for your M2 Pro, and then the inset of that shows another M2 Pro far away. So with the interconnectivity protocols that we developed in-house, you can see that in both ways, we're able to control the device and send the movements to the other end. So this one is leveraged. It's leveraging a technology called the prediction and rollback. And the essence of this technology is that we are able to address the latency issues when the two devices are far away, because the transmission delay is just inevitable. So this prediction and rollback allows us to desensitize, to make the system insensitive to the uh, up and downs of the latency. Yeah, the latency there is okay, but we don't want a certain surge of the latency to kill the whole application, to kill the interconnectivity of robots. So that's what this development has been doing. Now, in summary, we found that enabling technologies, both in hardware and software, they're required for collection of clinical evidence in a lot of situations. Now, the posture as compensation, that's the first point we identified, which is a challenge, should be restrained in clinical setting, and the various technologies should be developed toward that goal. Now, the X engine is our in-house solution, or we hope to be a good solution, to provide a standardized workflow for rehabilitation robots. The goal of that is to synthesize a wide range of devices, including the robot per se, and then the EMG, the muscle activation, and the motion capture, and then the brain recordings. And also, the interconnectivity matters, because in the future, we may want not only a group of devices to work together, but the robots per se, we want multiple units of them to work together. And because the setup of the rehabilitation centers, if you come to Beijing and Shanghai, you will see them scattered around the city, and which is, I think, will be also a similar trend also in Indonesia and many parts in all over the world. Um, then, in that case, if we want to have multiple units connected to each other, we would like to um, develop enabling technology that allows us to overcome the latency issues. So with all these collections of things, we are currently conducting a multi-center clinical trial in collaboration with University of Melbourne, Australia. And we are also doing our own multi-center randomized controlled trial, which is ongoing. Hopefully we can have some data and then results to share in the near future. And I'd like to acknowledge our collaborators at Fourier Intelligence. And also, this couldn't have been done without a multidisciplinary team at Beijing and Jiao Tong University. And also, many thanks to our funding agencies. Thank you very much.